Welcome back to Talking Europe. Well, in response to the Panama Papers, our next guest says he's furious and that he hopes the EU will now get more tools to address what he described as a cancer of the financial world. With me in studio for the second half of the show is former Finnish Prime Minister Jyrki Katainen. Mr. Katainen, today you're one of the vice presidents of the European Commission, managing jobs, growth, investment and competitiveness. We'll move on to all the structural reforms that are in place, lots of projects going on. But let's start with that Panama Papers scandal. Were you surprised by it?
In some extent, no, because everybody expected that there are wrongdoings. Okay, let's be clear that everybody who has a bank account in some countries which are called tax havens, they are not criminals. There's not necessarily illegal actions, but if you avoid taxes, then it's illegal. So, as I said, in some extent, I wasn't surprised, but of course, once you saw a big number of leaked documents, big number of people and organizations who are involved, of course, it's kind of shocking.
Because that's the thing, tax avoidance is legal because there's certain loopholes you can use. Tax evasion, where you're actually really going legally trying to hide your money, that's another thing. The Commission did have to jump to the defense of one of its own, a Spanish commissioner. Again, he was legal in that he had declared all the revenue and the income. But overall, do you think it's fair that the very wealthy or people who have more means can avoid paying taxes in the EU?
Well, it's not fair, because our welfare societies and our countries is based on the principle of fairness. If I earn something, I must pay taxes according my incomes. The same thing with the companies. And that is the reason why the European Commission has, for instance, proposed a new legislative proposals on tackling tax avoidance. And the principle that if you make profit in one country, the country has right to tax you. And this is a matter of fairness, it's a matter of level playing field, it's a matter of single market. So we have to take care of the sense of fairness, and also the welfare society needs financing.
Well, yeah, because that reforms, I think, is springing up after the LuxLeaks, which involves the international companies in different countries, but there's also the individual, I guess, money. You mentioned there, we need investment. One wonders how you can crack down on the potential loss of tax income. What can we do after these Panama Papers?
Well, we have to look if our legislation is up to date. I think it is in Europe, but now we have to make sure that we have better exchange of information with the third countries, so that there is less loopholes that the European companies or European individuals can go overseas and hide their incomes. Everybody should contribute to the same pot.
And at the same time, I know you've said before that the EU is facing a sizable investment gap since that economic crisis at the end of 2007, down something like 430 billion. How are we are we getting out of that?
Well, we can. There is no silver bullet or magic wand which can change everything overnight. But if the member states focus more on structural reforms, let's say to the quality of education, or in some countries there's a need to reform labor market in order to be more dynamic. In some countries there's a need to improve energy market in order to reduce the energy costs, etc. Then we can create better business environment, which will automatically trigger more investment. Also, we can do a lot in the European level, and that is the reason why Commission will focus on new internal market projects. In other words, we will create a digital single market so that the customers, French customers, have similar access to the services produced by Belgium or Finnish companies than they have here to the French companies.
So our markets, in a way, on that sense, would open up. But there might be a reluctance, because in Europe we still have that problem of national interest and national investment rather than that unity of the union.
Many leaders have said, okay, we have reduced our budget, we have increased taxes, and this is not enough. We need more push to investment environment, and that's why there is a growing awareness and support for internal market projects. Digital single market, energy market, capital market and circular economy. They are the 4 areas in which Commission will do concrete proposals how to harmonize the market.
Okay, so in a way more Europe rather than less on that issue. Well, here in France we saw the youth take to the street again this week, the latest round of protests against France's proposed reforms to its labour laws. Catherine Viette explains what changes are currently on the table.
Angry students and union members continue their protest against changes to the country's labour laws. The reforms are meant to simplify some of the rules governing the labour market, but critics say it'll remove worker protections, making it easier to fire employees. France's labour minister says it's important to get this right.
We aren't carrying out reforms for reform's sake. We're reforming to bring in a new type of relationship between workers and employers, and a new project that includes an initiative specifically for employees, and that's essential.
Parts of the proposed law have already been watered down, and a parliamentary committee is debating more than 800 amendments, including Article 30. This concerns redundancies. In its current version, a company must show 4 quarters of economic difficulties before it can let employees go. Another topic of discussion, flexibility in the hours worked. The current text allows for a 12-hour workday in the event of increased activity or reasons related to the business's organisation. However, the left wing of the Socialist Party wants to see it stay at a maximum of 10 hours per day. Finally, the issue of overtime. Currently, it's paid at 25% more for the first 8 hours and 50% more beyond that. The proposal would allow firms the flexibility to negotiate a lower rate of overtime pay. MPs will be putting the text to a final vote in May.
Well, we heard there from French Labour Minister feeling it's a very necessary measure here for France. Students, however, saying, well, you're putting corporations and companies once again above people. How do you see it? Does France need to reform its labour laws?
Certainly, this proposal of French government is very important because it will increase a number of jobs. It's always very difficult to reform labour market. I just would like to encourage French people to look around the other European countries, even the European countries which are even more generous with the social and welfare. France is very good in that sense, but there are even more generous social countries in Europe. And look at what kind of labor market there are. Usually, dynamic labor market correlates with the economic growth, and this correlates with the number of new jobs, and this correlates with the well-being. So I really encourage, and the whole Commission encourages, to push forward those reforms. When
you mention that those social states, I have to say, I think mostly towards the north, and including your native country, 58% or something of the budget going into social policies there. Very interesting one on the table at the minute, this universal income, basically giving workers or non-workers a certain amount of money every month. Is that going to be put in place? How do you think that's going to work? Won't that basically make us lazy?
Yeah, it's there will be a limited try how this new model could function. It's a very interesting idea because those people who are in favor of it says that it makes working easier. It makes temporary working easier. It encourages people to work instead of staying at home. So because the working life has changed, there is not anymore such a working life that everybody would go to the work at 8 or 9 and would come back at 4 or 5. But work is more. There's more part-time job. People want to work more as a part-time workers, and this kind of universal income could help them. Yes.
Now you mentioned briefly the structural reforms that are part of the EU's plans to improve things. One of those is getting education back. I believe you said in a recent interview that 1/5 of adults across the EU have very bad literacy problems. But when you look at Finland, it's famous for good education. But the economy isn't really great at the minute.
Finland is a typical country which is in the middle of structural changes. And the only medicine is to do structural reforms, which the current government tries to do. They are about to reform labor market. They are about to reform municipality structure. They are about to reform healthcare structures. So country which is so dependent on export, some close to 50% of GDP comes from foreign trade. You must be the most competitive in the world. And that means that you have to reform constantly yourself. And this is a precondition for for generous welfare society, because you have to earn money from abroad.
Okay, well, let's look at that earning money from abroad, maybe not even abroad, but getting people to invest, getting that private money back circulating. The European Fund for Strategic Investment, that's a plan by the EU where you're investing, I believe, so far almost 10 billion euros and getting a lot more back. Tell us more. How does that work?
Yeah, that's right. We have so-called Juncker plan, which is the investment plan for Europe. We have already 54 projects which have got financing from EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investment. In addition to this, there are 150 agreements between banks and EFSI on SME financing, small and medium-sized companies. And totaling this, we have used around 10 billion EU money for these purposes, and we expect this to trigger around 76 billion in terms of real investment. For instance, in France, there are around 40,000 SMEs which will get financing through French banks because of EFSI. And that's very, very good result.
So the EFSI is kind of taking a bit the risk out of it, and that's what's generating
the basic idea is that EFSI provides risk financing. It does not give money for free, but it provides risk financing, and by doing so, it crowds in private money, which is lying peacefully in the bank accounts at the moment. So Europe is full of liquidity. There's full of money. There's lots of money everywhere, but because of many reasons, it doesn't go to the real investment.
So to get it back active again could be a way to go. Now, another thing, of course, that the Commission looking very closely at this week is the migrant crisis. Looking at this Dublin regulation, which was put together in the 90s, this is where asylum seekers or refugees would have to apply for asylum in the first country they get to. Since the recent crisis, a lot of people have said it just doesn't work. Commission proposing to scrap it potentially?
Well, what we have proposed now is two options. Either to create European-wide asylum system, meaning that all the asylum seekers would be distributed directly according some key to the different countries. Or then we renovate a current Dublin system, meaning that if there are huge influx of people coming right now, in that particular situation, exceptional situation, we could trigger a relocation scheme. Now it's up to the member states and up to the European Parliament to decide to which direction we should go. But for sure, we have to renovate and repair Dublin system because we want to defend free movement of people. We cannot afford to close the borders because it would be very, very costly. It would be very bad for European people. So that's why we have to, at the same time, to defend external borders, but repair,
keep our internal borders flowing. But one wonders, because the second of the two options is to relocate people on almost with solidarity, and that's exactly what we haven't seen. Europe doesn't want to work together.
That's right. This is what Commission has proposed, and all the member states are constantly saying that the challenge is big enough or too big to deal with national decision making only. And all the leaders have said that we need a European solution. So we need solidarity, we need pragmatic thinking, because first of all, we have to help everybody who needs a protection. Yeah. Second, we have to be very pragmatic to deal a huge amount of people who are coming to Europe for many reasons. And there we need European solidarity, because if most of the people are coming only for one or two countries, everybody understands that they cannot stand the pressure. So that's why we have to help them.
Sounds a little bit wishful thinking in some ways.
But it should be pragmatic, result-oriented thinking too.
And what do you think then for the countries, like Greece and Italy, notably Greece? It was already struggling with its economy. It looks like in terms of its bailout, it's coming into trouble once again.
We are working very closely with Greek authorities and with ECP and IMF to solve the problems. It's very much up to Greek authorities now to implement all the reforms which they have promised to do. So if you don't correct your economy, it will not be corrected. It's as simple as this. So it's everything
Right
depends on
direction.
everything depends on the Greek authorities, national Greek parliament and the government, whether they are decisive enough to do corrective measures.
And as this thing stands, are you hopeful that, or do you think we'll be back in Euro crisis mode, Grexit mode again?
No, actually, if looking at what happened before last parliamentary elections in Greece, Greek situation was calming down. Market forces started to trust on Greece, and things were moving the right direction. Everybody recognized that there are still lots of challenges ahead, but nevertheless, things were stabilizing. And this same could happen if Greek authorities did the necessary decisions and, even more importantly, would implement them.
Okay, finally, Mr. Katainen, we've seen a referendum in the Netherlands this week voting against a trade deal that the EU and Ukraine had already pretty much put in place.
Yeah, it's this is an issue, normally a typical issue of national governments to deal with, because national referendums are always national issues. The Commission doesn't have that much to comment on this, so we take note the result. But now we are expecting and waiting for the analysis of Dutch government to hear what they are planning to do and how they will proceed after the referendum. But nevertheless, 27 member states have already implemented association agreement. There's a strong political will to have close cooperation with Ukraine, to help Ukrainian people through trade policy, through economic policy cooperation, through political cooperation. And this is also a fact. So let's see what kind of assessment the Dutch government will do.
As indeed, technically it was a non-binding referendum. Mr. Katainen, thank you so much for your time and your insight and joining us here on France 24. Thanks also to you at home for having watched. That brings us to the end of Talking Europe.